Hey there, welcome to another very special Lemon Amiga episode. This time we'll be checking out some tips and cheats from most of the games that we've been looking at already in those play guides. And we start off with some of the games that you might be familiar with from those play guides, some of those tips. And in Zool, of course, if we wait until the time is almost run out, on level 1.3 we can even evade the end of the level boss and completely ignore the end of the level boss. Just punch through the very first wall of the entire level and you will get some points, but more importantly you will get some extra lives that you desperately need to complete or at least get further in this game. You'll also remember, apart from the incessantly difficult part, we have to type in notes onto a keyboard to get off these levels. You might also remember a bonus level where we can jump in and we can play a game, and it's very great to find these hidden games in games like Zool, and we can bash around and play a shoot 'em up, and that thing is pretty long and I think it gives us some bonuses as well if we get further in it. Just like the Turrican games, it does get a little bit faster later on, it turns into a speed tunnel, but if you can survive this then it gives us extra high credit because this isn't easy and these clouds block our way as well. Moving on to Crazy Sue, and again this is one that you might remember that we covered in the actual play guide. This is something that I found out by accident whilst we played this in the Lemon Amiga Games competition, and this particular one requires us to jump blindly into a spot in the landscape, and as you can see it's pretty difficult to control this character but ultimately rewarding. And on this particular level, I think it could be level 4, maybe it's level 5, what you have to do is guide your way up by the book to the top of the mountain, and if you watch the play guides, every single one of the play guides virtually does the game exactly the same way to get through these levels. And yes, here it is, you jump off into that void below, and what you end up with is a special bonus room and some extra special bonus hidden music as well. It's extra special to find these extra special items, and that will whisk us on to the next level just like that with an extra special bonus as well. Yes, that was stage 4, so that means that we get to stage 5 with, well, a bit more score. Moving on, we get to Arabian Nights, and if you remember this particular level, Minecart level, look at all those diamonds. It's a pity that we don't get time to go all the way down there before the minecart. Well, you can actually do that. If you are racing ahead of that minecart, you can grab all those diamonds and still have time, hopefully, because it gives us an extra big bonus for the time by using that jump at the end of the level, and that means that we can usually jump ahead of the second cart, or at least the first cart, and win that race. And that gives us extra special bonuses, and it is possible if you rush straight through to the end of that level. Moving on to the settlers now, and we find, well, one tip that I can recommend is definitely the tip about joining units up from different camps, and that will help. So let's take a closer look at that particular mechanic in this tips video. First of all, we need to scan the area, find where those paths are, and maybe we can link them together. It has that special symbol, we can click on that and we can link to the enemy. That's something I think I only found out by mistake, but I haven't found out about it. Let's use that, let's link up our network to that spot and let's find out what's going to happen as a result of that. because I didn't really go into that in the play guide. And let's speed up that footage hopefully and get things on the move. You can see flags, and if there are no flags between two major flags like that, then you'll find two guys working in parallel. So let's just build a parallel path and let's see how much quickly it moves, hopefully using the flagged path and the non-flagged path. And so let's link up our community. And yes, you can see a red guy pouring through. I've no idea who he is, but he's got a bald head. So we have a red enemy guy pouring into our territory that we've obviously got as the peace pact has taken effect. But look at that, a blue guy, they've nicked one of our soldiers in return for a baldy guy. I have no idea who he's supposed to be. And look at that, we're also attacking our defences, so it won't be long before they attack that and take that over. So even though we've got a peace pact, what we've got is a baldy guy, and virtually some of these guys you can see will be walking, look at that, directly into the enemy territory, and the enemy will not only capture those but take those on as the enemy. So that peace pact in that particular case hasn't worked, because you can see my guys walking straight to the enemy camp, and that's definitely helpful if you have a lack of wood and have a lack of raw materials. They will help us out desperately and when we are in that situation, and the idiot enemies will even give us some gold. But moving on from that, there is a special hints file in the WHD load version, and there's also, if you find that, a settlers editor file, which I think is on the Eminent, and from there we can edit the settlers on our hard drive, and we can edit the saves of the settlers that we've managed to save on our disk. I noticed number 3 there, so let's check out number 3 and see what it looks like. See, on this particular map, it gives us a geology map of everything that we've got saved in that save, and we can alter that save, add things and take things away, and place gold everywhere and raw materials to help us out. And I've never quite figured out how this particular editor works, but you can see this editor, edset 0.8b, I think it is, 1994. This is an editor for the settlers save, so if you ever wanted to edit, add things and maximise granite in a rock face, well, this is the time to do it. And a whole load of fish as well. So if you want to check out the settlers saves, these are the settlers save editors, and from here we can do all kinds of weird things, none of which I'm going to go into in this tip special. Moving on, we get to the secrets of Monkey Island, and I think if you hold down the control key and press W for win, if you hold down one of those things, it will come up, you win! You scored 800 out of 800 points, and at the end of all of that, it will bring up the final credits of the game. We can access this special cheat from any point in the game, so we can complete the game at any point. Unlike the Secrets of Monkey Island 2, because in that one we actually find, really it isn't a semi-secret because everybody knows this one, it's the telephone booth that you find on Dinky Island. And if you call the phone booth, that will ring through to the EA helpline, and the EA helpline will help customers out. In this case, it's a good job that we aren't connected to the EA helpline, because this guy or girl really does deliver some lines which might be inappropriate for a job description. But apart from that, we can ask all kinds of ridiculous questions and get the most out of that helpline. So if you want to investigate that further, you can ask, again, all kinds of dumb and idiotic questions in these stupid games, and waste 10 minutes speaking onto the helpline, and it doesn't actually help us get out of this particular maze. and I can't actually remember how you get out of this particular maze in this game, but whatever it is, I think you have to keep going north and west or something like that, and eventually it will lead us out of it. So there is a secret in Dynamite Dux, and that's printed on the Lemon Amiga website, and it's also printed on the screen right now, but I couldn't actually get that to work. Apparently if you do that, it makes this, well, nude, but I couldn't get that to work, and that's just a good job because it's a ridiculous thing anyway. So that's some hidden secret that you can find in Dynamite Dux. Similarly, the Mark Researcher Chambers of Shoulin game. We've covered some Mark Researcher games already, but in this one there is an Easter egg, and many players won't be aware of this, but if you keep the battle going for long enough, you'll find a guy materialises. He hangs around in the background watching us, and he'll stay watching us until we get another hit. So I'm not quite sure, but I think if we don't get hit, that guy will eventually show up after about 2 minutes, and we'll fast forward that footage so that he does actually appear. And when the enemy strikes, that could be, here we go, the symbol for that to happen. And the guy just sits there, and it's a great thing, and there should be really more touches like that in these types of games. You can see it's really easy to force the enemy to strike and get no hits whatsoever, but as soon as the enemy does strike, then that guy will fall off. And that's actually very funny. So let's move on to some more Easter eggs. This is Benefactor, and of course on this level what do we find? Well, this is a Signosis game. So what do we find? We find Lemmings. It's fun to see Lemmings as a hidden Easter egg, and there are a number of hidden Easter eggs that I tried to find, but I couldn't find too many on the Amiga, so there are quite a few that had Lemmings in there. So if you remember Captain Planet, one of my favourite games, it had a lemming in there, even though that's nothing to do with Signosis whatsoever. That's one of my favourite Easter eggs. Also Leander, if I can borrow this particular footage from the internet, it shows us a level with lemmings in there, because this is a Signosis game and you can play around with those lemmings. And it's a pity that didn't happen earlier on in the game so that more players could have appreciated that joke. It doesn't, fortunately, so I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to do there. So let's move on to another game. This is Alien Breed. This is the first one, I think, and if you interact with the computer, at least the major one, I think at least on level 2, at least if you take the platform lift up, it will take us on to the second level, and from here we can interact with that computer. If we type in some weird things on the keyboard, it will also interact with us, and it will give us some funny messages. So if we type in ST mode, you can see it turns it into an Atari ST simulator, pretty crappy, with those ridiculous colours and that jerky frame rate. And so if we type in other things into the computer, maybe other things will happen.
Welcome to Intech Systems.
I think most of these codes are available on the Lemon Amiga website, so if you check out them and type them in, you'll get hidden messages, much like IK Plus, that we're hopefully not going to go into in this tip special, because there's too many of them already. So you can see some things appear when you type in those hidden messages. Some things quite funny, sometimes quite bland, sometimes quite mysterious, but it's great that these Easter eggs are in this particular game and other games as well, and maybe there are more of these that I haven't found on the Amiga. skipping ahead, hopefully we can find the spy who loved me. And we've recently played this in the competition. What you have to do is to collect every single coin on the first level you can lay your hands on, and then having done that, I don't believe that it is possible to collect the last one, but maybe it is. But if you drive on that grass, you'll restart that level, and that means you'll have to play it all again. Now, if you collect every single coin in the level, and well, some of them aren't possible to get, but all the ones that you can get, it should mean that by the end of it we get somewhere around the 150 coin mark. So let's see if we can reach it. There are no time limits in this game, and the score goes up by miles covered, so it doesn't matter how far or how fast we travel. So I managed to collect 145 coins, so I definitely missed 5 due to being cautious, but that should mean that by the time that you get all the way through to the first truck in the game, we can simply afford the subconversion right off the bat, and then we can spend all of the rest of that cash on health. It's important not to buy the health first, otherwise that will take away too much cash for the subconversion. So I've got 171 coins, let's buy the sub, that gives us 21 in this case. Let's power up, hopefully, with the rest of it. And hopefully by the end of the level, all we need to do now is to drive off that jetty. And the secret to this game is of course to stop. And that hasn't worked in this particular case, but usually we can simply hang back behind the enemies and take all the time in the world to destroy them on the road. You can see I have quite a few coins now by the time we get to the second truck, due to having already bought the subconversion. And that sacrifices a life, but we have 4 lives, and let's jet on. We can in fact buy the missile for the helicopter as well, but I choose to buy the paint and the smoke. Let's dive on through to the end of that pier. That will also award us full health on the next level. And another kind of Easter egg is if you restart this particular section of The Spy Who Loved Me, you'll find guys piling up on the level and they will stay there for all of your lives. So that's quite fun to see as well. And so let's move on to another game. And this is Jaguar XJ220. And normally we will put on the music and we can enjoy any one of 6 tracks whilst we're playing this game. So let's select that and let's take in the normal experience of Jaguar. Go! You can see the normal experience of Jag manages to get away with the rock level, the cliff level, a lot easier and a lot smoother than Lotus 3 ended up doing when that was released, and Lotus 3 actually copied something from this game, which is now ironic because this game borrowed everything it knows from Lotus 2. You can see the frame rate is smooth, not as smooth as Crazy Cars 3 that we saw, and not as fast as Vroom and F1, but it is moderately fast and it is good to play this game. Unfortunately the car doesn't have much grip and it's not much of a joy to play it. But what we can do instead of choosing that is choose mode, and that will put us onto the radio, and after we choose mode and the track, that should mean that whatever track we choose is played at a normal rate, but the actual level is played faster. Go! This hopefully is the very next level, and as you can see the car grips the road a lot more and the scenery moves a lot more quickly, especially when there isn't much scenery to be seen. And this runs at full frame rate. This was recorded with an unexpanded Amiga 1200, so it should run as fast as an Amiga 500 as far as I know. and so if you put on the radio before you start any level, then it becomes very much faster and the car becomes very much grippier, and so the game becomes very much more fun as a result. All those people that said Jag was slow and boring and it really could have done with extra features, well, I'll just remind everybody that they did strip out the pit stop feature, which was one of the better features of the game, because Jaguar made them take it out because they said, well, our cars shouldn't run out of fuel after only 3 or 4 laps. That's a good point, but unfortunately it means good elements of the game is taken away and it takes forever to pad around these courses usually. So with the frame skip on, or whatever it is, it might lower the frame rate down to 16 frames per second, or whatever it is, but you can see it certainly shoves that screen around at a great rate.
Into the wonderful, into the wonderful.
Moving quickly on to Gods, we find the very first level, and the very first level is on a timer, a 2-minute timer, so if we don't get to the top of it before that time, we can't get the special bonus. So that's switch 1 you saw me pull in there. We can leave switch 1 in its up position to activate that. We didn't, we left that in the down position, so at some point I'm going to have to return to that switch 1. That isn't important for the special bonus, that's only important for another bonus secret bonus later on, so we can ignore it for the moment. So let's steam on through those enemies, and of course time is of the essence, so we can now switch 2, that's switch 2. We can leave that in the down position, we don't have to move that up, we can leave that exactly where it is, and that may or may not be important, but you can see I chose to get the extra health. That's not really appropriate to waste time getting that, and if you have full health when you get to the very top of the level, it gives us a bonus, but we're going to get some full health anyway because of this bonus, so that wasn't any point. Let's switch 4, go back to number 3, and that will give us the key and the bonus chest, but we're on a timer. Let's switch 4 and 5 again on our way up towards switch 7, and we can ignore number 6 here on the wall, that's for the end of the level. If we rush all the way through to 7, it will give us a bonus and it will give us the block that we need. Now if we don't get this block in time, that will not come out, but there are tips online which enable you to fool the level so that does come out of the wall, and when you finally get on there it will give us a bonus crystal, and it will also, if you combine that with another secret bonus on level 2, it will eventually give us a huge bonus. So now that we've done that, we've got there within the 2 minutes, that's fine. So what we need to do now is ignore those 4 and 5 and go back to all these again. Let's pick up the key and get the specials, and let's work our way down to number 2 again. And so if you have left switch 1 in the up position, up for activate, down for deactivate, when you push this up it will give us access to a shortcut, and if you haven't it won't do anything. So what we're going to have to do is speed that footage up, get back to switch 1, put that up to the on position again, and then hopefully go back to number 2. And that will give us the final shortcut and the final extra bonuses that we'll get on the level. And as I say, if you manage to get through all of this without any health loss, it will give us extra bonuses as well. So that's the shortcut opened up, and one more enemy and a few more bonuses. That's all of the bonuses hopefully on this particular level, so that should mean that we can get through to the final room and collect those extra few items. haven't quite got to the end with full health, so I don't get the extra life, but what we do get is access to level 2. So I always wondered how to make that hidden switch appear, and you can switch that now if you follow that formula. So rushing on now, Indianapolis 500, the slow car is pathetic and it won't win anything. The Lola Buick is average and it's still slow and it won't win anything, so let's move on to the Penske Chevrolet. And the Chevy, in this case, is the hardest car to set up in the game. So let's move on to a save file. This was played in the Lemon Amiga versus English Amiga board competition. And this is where I fine-tuned my setup. And so for this, let's just put 10 gallons in there. 5 would be better for the practice runs, but to give you an average speed, I'm putting 10 in there. And now we're going to go through all of the gauges, and hopefully you can write down where those are. I think the front one is 4 from the top, and the rear one is 3 from the top. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, and if you move it to 4 it goes flat, so you can't do that, so it's 3 from the top. And so that's the drag sorted out, 4 and 3. And so let's check out the rest of the car if we can get the keys sorted out. Let's have a look at the tyres. It looks like medium right rear, and so it looks like soft on the left and medium on the right, and you can see soft left rear, medium on the front right. So that's how you set those up, and the stagger is set up 0, 0 it looks like. So let's leave it at that for now and go on to the next menu, where we find tyre pressures. So 25, 25 all around is what I like to have. It's an average PSI, but it does for me. And this is an easy car to drive, don't forget, we don't want anything complicated. So let's have a look at my shock absorbers, and it's middle of the road, right front, and right rear is pretty soft, and left rear is pretty firm, because it's on the inside track. And left front is middle of the road again. So you only really have to change 2 values on that one. You can leave the rest in the middle. Let's look at those cambers. Minus 75 is on the front right, and on the rear right is plus 50. Left rear is plus 1.75. Left front is plus 1. So if you want to write those down, and those are my gear ratios as well, those particular gear ratios. So that's my car setup, and hopefully you can alter your car setup to that. Now there are drawbacks and advantages, and I have tried every setup under the sun and under the moon. Once we got underway with the competition over that 3 weeks, and there were some crazy setups with cars which only steered left, and because we're only steering left, that would not seem sensible, but I don't believe that that's the best way to drive a car. So let's put the boost on 9 by pressing the 9 key, and the oil in this case will be running at high temperature, so the oil light will be flashing, and eventually it will be running out of fuel as well, so the fuel gauge will start flashing. But whatever, you can see that we're up to 230 miles per hour, which anything over 230 is what you really need to aim for, and I've had it up to 236 as my maximum, which you can only achieve in this car. And so, as I say, it has one drawback, and that it has understeer. So unfortunately you'll have to dive into those corners and try and avoid that understeer, otherwise you'll be touching the sides, and that's one thing you'll have to preempt. Unfortunately it's not perfect to drive, but you can see that we've got around there in 39 seconds, and if you can get around Indianapolis in 39 seconds, then it should hold us in good stead to qualify. Because you're running out of fuel, and I like 10 gallons in there, and then I can get through the 4 laps and burn it through, because if we weren't, we'd be on the final gallon by now. But here we go, this hopefully is the final qualifying lap, and you should say I dive in here, and then because of that understeer, it's understeering into that corner. So on the power again, what do we get? 37, 38, 39. So that puts us in number 4, I think it is, with an average of 226 miles per hour. Let's dive on into that race, and you can have as long as you like, but I think I chose the 30 laps because that was the competition. That's what we had to do, 30 laps. And see how far we could get in those 30. So, starting the race, we are in 4th position. We're now in 2nd position and only just behind that leader. The leader is fast, but we are faster. That guy's driving the same car, but we are just that bit quicker. And I think I only just put enough fuel in to demonstrate my point, but the point is that we can get to 1st place and beat the other guys. If you put more fuel in to last the race, then you'll find it harder. But we can qualify in 4th, and having qualified in 4th, those guys will eventually make a mistake, and the hardest part about this race is staying out of trouble, because guys will crash all over the place, and because we've enabled the yellow flags, the race will slow down periodically, and we'll have to go around for a few laps at slow speeds. But you can see, despite having only 7 gallons of fuel in there, I'm choosing to rush into the pits, and if I brake here, no, unfortunately that's too late, and that means we cannot, unfortunately, brake in time for our pit box. And that's how you don't qualify and get into 1st place. And so, skipping on, we get through to the final game that I'm going to cover for the last 10 minutes. This is F1 GP. And the editor I think you can find on the Aminet. The editor is quite fun once we eventually load it. And you can see lots of other files as well in that particular directory. The editor has lots of funky gadgets, and you can load this from the workbench, and if you put in your F1 GP disk 2 into the disk drive, we can then load from the binary that into the computer's memory. Or if we have it running, which we'll cover a bit later on, in memory, we can pull that from the memory as well, and it'll say, please put your F1 GP disk 2 in. Because we're running Assign X, we can assign it anywhere, and we'll be covering Assign X a little bit in another one of our videos, the Tool Special. But you can see that we can find wherever disk 2 is on whichever one of our machines, and we can select that file. On the WHD load version, it will be in a data directory, and from here we can load it up. You can see we can also load a data file, and those data files are floating around the internet, and I have compiled my own as well. So you can see we can change the speed all the way up to NTSC speed, and NTSC is smoother, of course, we compile more frames per second in there, which is great. But if you pile over 30 in NTSC or over 25 in PAL, unfortunately the game will break. And I think even 16 frames per second is what you really should be putting that game to in most modes, otherwise the game will break if you edit it with F1 GP Ed. So this is my F1 GP 2009 directory that I have. This is a WXD load. In here you'll find the actual game installed, which won't work because it doesn't work, it requires WHD load. But what we've got is a start, and that start is a script file. Let's just dive into that and check it out. That script file will launch the game for us. Let's see how I achieved it in this particular case. And it doesn't take a genius. We assigned all of the disks that it needed into that particular place that the script is in, and we can run F1 GP packed if we want to do, and then if we run F1 GP, that will run itself in its own window, which is a kind of a hack of Workbench. We can run it and run it, and that means that it should run on its own public screen, which we can then drag down at any point, and that should keep the workbench in the background, even hopefully if we chose to switch that off. And so I'm typing in the actual key code from the actual manual, because sometimes, unless you edit the hack, it will come up with that and you won't be able to test out your amenities because you won't have edited the hack, but it looks like I've edited the original file in this case. So in order to test out this configuration, to prove that it's working, I'm now going to load up the game. We're going to see what it actually does. And so Lando Norris in this case. And we are racing as Lando Norris. And again, if you want to actually play these games in the race, I think 16 frames per second on the PAL version and 18 on the NTSC is all you can go up to, otherwise the game will break. But if you go into practice mode, that allows virtually all frames per second, so you can dive around these tracks in practice mode at any frames per second. And so we have the game now in memory, it's working, it is the original but it is in memory. So that should mean that we can start the F1 GP head and we can have that in memory as well. So let's start that up, and now we can pull in the information from the memory. And what that will do is, well, we loaded that from a data file before, but now that's running in the game. We can check that out, click on teams, yes, Mercedes is there, Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, and you can also see McLaren, Lando Norris, and currently Carlos Sainz. So, Sainz there, Sebastian Vettel currently, and Charles Leclerc. So, we can see that things have changed even since a few months ago. The world turns very rapidly these days. So, what else can we do now? We can also change other things in the game, and we can go through this and look at all kinds of options that we can only access once that game is in memory. And I don't really want to fiddle with any of these because it's so fragile, this thing can break at any point. So it's best to change one thing and save it up, and don't overwrite the major file, overwrite a backup and have several backups, and if that major thing breaks that game, then you can switch it off again and revert back to one that actually does work. So you can see all my data files are here, and I'll link those of course in the description. So you can download these, and so you can see all of the F1 GP data files. Let's check out 1980. John Watson, Alan Prost, Nelson Piquet and Hector Reback. So Alan Jones is in there and Carlos Reutemann. So we can change the drivers all the way back, and hopefully a little bit later on we can change the graphics as well to match, and even the sound effects as well to match. And if only this thing was a lot more stable, we could get a lot more stable things out of it. You can see we can change the traction control. That's normally on, but in this case it's off. And maybe that makes the game a lot more tougher, no idea, but in this case it seems to be off. So let's leave that on for the time being, and if we change that and install that, that'll probably break the game. But because we're running 25 frames per second, that won't run in competitive mode. That will only run in practice mode. You can see the F1 GP patch. We can install it from here as well and turn the HUD on. Unfortunately, that breaks the installation again, and so I have to remove that. But I did get that to work on one of my previous installs. And we can also reset the local speed factors. No idea what that does. And so the memory patches are relevant to everything in the memory that we've got going on, and we can only do that if the game is running in the memory. So miscellaneous, we can turn on a clock, we can fix speed problems, and we can have safe indestructibility. So we can have those things with the memory patches. And checking out the others, there's also the sound patches, the graphics, statistics, and all kinds of calculators as well. Let's just see what a mess I made of that particular setup by going to another practice circuit and again this thing will only play in demo mode, but we're now riding with Kevin Magnuson. So in this case, what we have in the F1 GP Ed file is not in memory, and that's because we forgot to save it to the memory. And if we do save it to the memory, that will overwrite the game data in memory. It won't touch the disk drive, it won't touch the data file either, it'll write what we've got into the memory. So let's do that, and it'll say, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And then the game instantly will be restarted, and that will now have, hopefully, the results of the latest tweaks that we made. If you remember, we went back, and yes, here we go, Nigel Mansell is now driving a 2019 McLaren around Hungary, the Hungaroring. So, yes, that has made a difference. You can see the cockpit and the lights and everything else, very fine. But that doesn't really change much else, so we can change the air socket wrench noise and the car noise and the klaxon noise. All of those things, hopefully you can be able to download my archive in the description. So I probably won't bother doing that in this particular video since it's going on for long enough, but you can see we can load things through using that into our F1 GP, and we can load in sound effects on the fly. What I'd rather do is load up the sound samples and everything else when it's not running live, and then you can basically have a test thing and again back up your backups, so you can see all kinds of engine noises are in here. Not that any of them will play unless you actually try those live in the game. So hopefully we'll move on to display factors a little later on, and 7 frames per second. Not quite sure what happened there or why the game is broken, but it is, and it's too late to go back, so let's just mess around anyway. And I think 16, if I'm not mistaken, is what you really should be aiming for if you want to fix this game. Finally, we'll move on to the graphics, and so we can change all of the graphics. We haven't loaded anything at the moment, so we can load settings, and we can load them, and we can save them up to memory as well. So if we load up a settings file, then that will load up all of the graphics for all the labels that you can see on the left hand side. So if we actually click on the settings file, there it is, and it means we can load up and view the whole thing. So this is apparently a McLaren, and so if we load up the settings, they'll do that. But if we want to change picture individually, then we click on the image at the top of that menu bar at the top of the screen, and that means we can change just that image. You can see we can change to a variety of images in the game, and we can save those up to the binary or to the memory at any point. But you can see that that is a separate save from the main save, because it might crash the game and crash the exe, so you really want to tweak things individually. So what have we got going on? Center hands, some of these work and some of them don't. Some of them are too big and need to be resized, and I haven't quite tweaked those enough. But hopefully those things are all set now, so if I save those things to memory, that will mean that it comes up with an error message, and that will mean that the game is corrupt. But well, let's try it anyway. We've saved it to memory, and now practicing circuit, which we should still be able to do, but we can't because the exe is broken, but we'll check it out anyway. And so let's see what differences those differences made. So now it sounds like and looks like that Nigel Mansell is driving a McLaren from maybe 1990, and he's got Senna's gloves on, and the dashboard has crashed because we didn't place those in the right place. But I hope that's given you a few tips that you can remember and play along yourself. Thank you.